Today's lesson we are going to talk about organizing data. So our goals here are just to manipulate the data for ease of interpretation. We want to create a stem and leaf plot, a frequency table, a histogram, and a bar graph to display data. And we also want to compare the types of data displays and analyze their strengths. So we have some data here that we're going to look at. And the first thing we're going to do is put this in a frequency table. So the data is how old were you when you bought your first home? And this is in years. So as you can see on the table there, the numbers are just in there randomly, probably how people answered, like in a survey at the mall or something like that. So they asked the question, people answered, and they just wrote down the answer. What we want to do is organize this a little better, so we're going to put it in a frequency table. And what I do in a frequency table is I'm just going to organize this in groups of 10s here. So 0 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29. And I'm just going to tally those and count them up. So for example, in the 0 to 9 column, that would be single digits. Well, if you look at our table, there's nobody in the single digits when they bought their first home. 10 to 19, again, if you look there, there's nobody in the 10 to 19 range when they bought their first home. But in the 20 to 29, you'll notice that we have somebody that was 24. And I just like to cross them out so I keep track of the ones I've already counted. And then you'll notice we have a 23. So I'm going to make another tally. And then we have a 27. So I'm going to make another tally. And we have a 24. Another 24. So I'm going to make another tally. I see a 29 here. Now that's my fifth one, so I'm going to make my group of 5 there. And then I have one more 29. And then that is all I see. So then for my frequency for the 20 to 29, there's 6. Okay, and we can go ahead and put the zeros in for the other ones because there wasn't any in that age group. So pause the video here and take some time to go through this and fill it in. And then when you're done, you can check it to see that you've completed it correctly. So this is what your completed frequency table should look like. Just a couple of things about a frequency table. If I just look at the frequency table, I could kind of get an idea of which group of people, say, were the oldest group of people when they bought their first home. But by just looking at the frequency table, I could not answer a question like, how old was the oldest person? And again, I couldn't do that because all I know is 3 people were in their 60s in this survey, but if I just look at the frequency table, I don't know their specific ages. Okay? But I could answer questions like, well, how many people were in their 40s when they bought their first home? I could look at the graph, or I could look at the frequency table and say, well, 7 people were in their 40s when they bought their first home. So you can answer some general questions with the frequency table, but you can't get too specific with the frequency table. The next way we're going to organize our data is in a stem and leaf plot. One thing about a stem and leaf plot here is it looks similar to a frequency table, but it's not. One thing that you have to do in a stem and leaf plot is you have to put the numbers in order. So when I look at the data table that we're given, I need to find the smallest number. So this one, it takes a little bit because you got to make sure you're going in order. So the smallest number in our table is actually 23. So I'm going to cross out the 23. Now how a stem and leaf works is, you notice on the left-hand side, the left column of my stem and leaf, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? So 23 is going to go with the 2, and I'm just going to put the 3 there. So when I look at that, that is going to read as 23. Okay, now my next smallest number in our data is 24. So after the 3, I put comma 4. Now we have 2 24s. I also have one down here, so I need to list that twice. Okay, and then my next one is 27. That's my next smallest one, so comma 7. And then I have a 29 down here, and I have another 29 down here. So when I look at that row of my stem and leaf plot, again, we're going to read that as 23, 24, 24, 27, 29, 29. So what I want you to do right now is pause the video, go ahead, fill in the rest of your stem and leaf plot. When you got it filled in, go ahead and start the video again to check it and see how you did. All right, so here's what your stem and leaf plot should look like. Again, now with a stem and leaf plot, we can answer a few more questions with that than we can with a frequency table. On a frequency table, remember, we couldn't be very specific, but on a stem and leaf, we can. So if I look at just a stem and leaf plot and I ask how old was the oldest person when they bought their first home in this survey, I can look at the stem and leaf plot and go to the bottom of it and see that it's 63 was how old the oldest person was when they bought their first home in this survey. Likewise, I could answer how old was the youngest person in this survey when they bought their first home. I can go to the top there and see that the youngest person was 23. So with a stem and leaf plot, you can get a little more specific with your questions. You can still figure out like how many people were in their 30s when they bought their first home. You just got to count it out there a little bit, but it is organized so that you could do that. So there's a stem and leaf plot, and the most important thing there is remember you have to put those numbers in order. All right, the last way we're going to look at organizing data here is with a histogram. Now with a histogram on the bottom, you'll notice that the intervals on the bottom are the same as the intervals that were in our frequency table. So the best way to make a histogram is to go from your frequency table to your histogram. If you try to do this with your raw data off of this, it's going to be very time consuming to do that. So again, look at your frequency table to make your histogram, because that will make it very easy. So if I go back to my frequency table, I see that from 0 to 9 and 10 to 19 there was nothing in there, so I don't have to worry about making a bar there. From 20 to 29, the height of that was 6. So I go back to my histogram here. In my bar from the 20 to 29, I'm going to go up to 6 on that and make my bar. And I'm just going to fill it in a little bit here so we can see it okay. All right. So then I would go back to my frequency table, look for the 30 to 39 interval, and see that that's at 5. So my 30 to 39, again, I'm going to draw that bar up to 5. All right, so take a moment here, pause the video, finish your histogram, and then when you have it filled out, you can start the video again to check it. So here's a look at what your histogram should look like. And a histogram is basically just a visual representation of your frequency table. So you really can ask probably the same amount of questions or answer the same amount of questions from a histogram as you could from a frequency table. It just gives you a visual. So if I want to say, which age group had the most people in it when they bought their first home, I could just look at that and see that the bar for the 40 to 49 age group is the highest. So there was more people that age when they bought their first home than any of the other age groups in this survey. All right, to finish out here, we're just going to look at this table of values here and make a stem and leaf, a frequency table, and a histogram. Now when I have to make all three of these, I think it's easier to do the stem and leaf first, because once I make the stem and leaf, I can make the other two based off the stem and leaf. So when I look at this set of data here, my smallest number is 2. So I'm going to have a 2, and again I'll cross that off on here so I know I've used it. I have a 3, and again I'll cross that off so I know I've used it. There are 2 4s in the table. I'm going to cross those off. There's a 5. Cross that off. There's a 6. Cross that off. And then there is a 7. We'll cross that off. Okay? So why don't you go ahead, finish making your stem and leaf. Pause the video here. And then when you come back, we'll just check just your stem and leaf, and I'll show you why it's easier to start the stem and leaf first, because then when we make our frequency table, it'll go a lot faster for that. All right, so if you take a look at the stem and leaf there, that's what it should look like. So now I'm going to use that stem and leaf to make my frequency table. So the 0 to 9, now I can just look at my stem and leaf and count them. I don't have to hunt all over the data table to do that. So I can look and see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 numbers in the 0 to 9 range. Okay, now I can just look at the 10 to 19 and see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers there. Again, we can just count them from the stem and leaf. The 20 to 29 also has 8. And the 30 to 39 just has the 1. Okay? Now the other thing I can use my frequency table here for is just to check to make sure I have everything accounted for. If I look at my original table here, I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows, and there's 3 columns. So 8 times 3 is 24. That tells me there's 24 pieces of data. So when I add up the numbers in my frequency table, they should add up to 24. Well, 7 plus 8 is 15. 15 plus 8 is 23. And 23 plus 1 is 24. So that's just a quick way to check to make sure you have them all accounted for. Now again, you can use your frequency table to make your histogram. So pause the video here for a moment. Make your histogram. When you have it done, you can resume the video to check. So here's what the histogram should look like. So make sure you have that. Once you've completed everything here, you've answered the questions, let me know so I can check and give you your homework assignment, and then you can go ahead and complete that.